Welcome to Explorer Classroom. My name is Vivette Dukes, and I'm so glad you're joining us today. This month has so many holidays coming up: winter solstice, Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, and more. We know our viewers are celebrating and cherishing family traditions, and we wish you all a beautiful season of light and love. At National Geographic, we use the power of science, exploration, education, and storytelling to illuminate and protect the wonder of our world. Explorer Classroom connects students worldwide with our National Geographic Explorers for short lessons and time for your questions. Today, our explorer is none other than Meg Lowman, also known as Canopy Meg. Meg is a conservation ecologist and arbor nut, which means she explores treetops. Meg is a pioneer in treetop science who has created kits to help people fully explore forests, including putting on a harness and floating above the canopy in a blimp to sail above the treetops to investigate this incredible place we hardly ever see. Today, Meg will take us on an adventure in the treetops and explain why it is an important place to our world and worthy of our curiosity and protection. Before we get into today's lesson, I'd like to welcome our registered viewers who join us from around the globe. Special shout outs for today go to Jennings Elementary School, woohoo! Shilton School District, shout out. Hillcrest STEAM Academy, how are you? Zion Lutheran School, hey there. Don Valley Middle School, yay, happy to have you. Marshall Middle School, hi there. And all of our home schools out there. We're thrilled to have you all here. And with that, let's get this Explorer Classroom started. It's time to turn it over to Meg to share all about discovering the 8th continent. Take it away, Meg.
Hey, thanks so much, Vivette. Well, I'm going to turn on my screen share so that I can show all of you some nice pictures, I hope, of what the canopy is all about, and we can all explore the rainforest together. So hopefully you're now about to see the screen okay, and if you're not, I'll count on Andre to tell me. And I'm going to spend maybe 20 minutes giving you a few pictures and ideas about the treetops, and then you can ask me any question you would like. So here we go. What is an arbor nut, and where in the heck is the 8th continent? Those are the two questions I hope to answer for you today. So raise your hand if you ever climbed a tree. Even though I can't see you, I can see a few classes, and I see a lot of hands up in the air. And maybe you didn't use a harness like these kids did in my neighborhood, because they obviously climb trees with me. But even if you just climb a tree and sit on the lowest branch, or even stand on your tiptoes, you probably might see something you never saw before. And the word arbor nut means someone who explores all of the foliage and bark and bits of the tree, including the very, very top. And you know, the word astronaut are people who explore outer space. Aquanauts are people who explore undersea, but arbor nuts are the newest explorers because we only started doing this about 30 or 40 years ago. So if you grow up and decide you'd like to be a treetop explorer, you too can become an arbor nut. And to be an arbor nut, I actually had to invent my own toolkit, because when I started climbing trees, believe it or not, way back in 1978, way before you were born, I didn't know how to get up there. And some of the trees that I found were really, really tall. The tallest trees in the world grow 300 feet tall. So I needed to get some tools. And the first tool that I made for myself, because I couldn't buy one living in Australia at the time, I made myself a slingshot. And I took a piece of metal and I forged it soft so that I could turn it into a Y shape. and I got a piece of rubber from an old tire that was flat on somebody's car, and I cut a piece of rubber out to tie to this piece of metal, and then I used a fish line to put over a branch, and with the fish line I pulled my climbing rope over the branch. So lo and behold, I had a way to get to the top of the tree by putting a rope up there using my slingshot as the tool. So over time, I climbed hundreds of trees by myself with this method, but it's a little lonely just climbing on one tree, even though it's really kind of easy and very portable because you can put your rope and your fish line and your slingshot in one duffel bag and away you go. In fact, here's my student, Anthony. He is 330 feet high in a redwood tree in California, studying the very, very tops of the tree and how much energy the foliage is making. And here's a few other students that used ropes and slingshots in Taiwan, which is a country straight across the Pacific from California, where Anthony was in that redwood tree. And the trees in Taiwan are also really tall, about 300 feet high. And they're so tall that I put a little bit of a circle around the students because they almost look like little ants in the tops of these trees. So these are all people who use ropes and slingshots to climb trees. But sometimes we need to take 20 people up the tree all at once. And we can't obviously all climb the same rope or it might break. So over the years, in fact, way back in 1985, I built and designed the first canopy walkway in the world here in the Amazon. And I also built one in Australia where I lived at the time. And since then, I've helped build probably about 30 or 40 of these canopy walkways or skywalks that can allow a whole class of students to explore the canopy all at once. And maybe some of you have been to some. There's a walkway in Ohio, there's one in Vermont, there's one here in Florida where I live, and there are quite a few in different tropical forests around the world that help us as arbornauts make discoveries about the treetops. If you really, really become a serious scientist like me, you might get invited on an expedition such as this one using a hot air balloon, and you can barely see me standing on this Raft, which is an inflatable device with a bit of trampoline mesh in between the red spokes. And with this raft, we can put the raft on the tops of the trees, just like a base camp, so that we can go up and down the tree and work at night and work in groups and do all kinds of neat things. But the inflatable hot air balloon helps us move the raft around a forest to study in different treetops. And here I am at night. You can barely see me. I've climbed up a rope into this raft, which is quite cool because it's made like a bicycle tire, but it's all inflatable rubber with this sort of trampoline mesh in between, as I mentioned. And so I can study all of the bugs that live in the trees at night. And guess what? More insects eat the treetops by nighttime than they do by daytime. This is kind of puzzling, and it took me quite a few years to find this out, but it makes good sense because if the insects eat in the daytime, the birds might eat them. And if they feed at night, they can, under the cloak of darkness, eat their beautiful foliage and have their dinner in peace without birds nibbling at them. So I ended up having to use a lot of my tools at night as an arbornaut instead of by day. The fourth tool, after we have slingshots plus ropes, and we have canopy skywalks, and we have inflatable gadgets, is this fourth tool, which is actually a construction crane that we've transported down to the tropics. And we can use the bucket of the crane and visit all the leaves or all the iguanas or maybe all the sloths, whatever it is we're studying, that live up in the tops of the trees. But it's a little bit limiting because you can only reach things that are close enough to the arm of the crane, as you can figure out. And this crane, in this case, I'll go back to that quickly, is in Panama, where I actually worked on bugs eating leaves. And I would get into this bucket and I would drive the crane around, and I could study every leaf that was in the reach of the arm of the crane, which was really kind of fun. So what have we discovered with this toolkit that we've invented as new arbor nuts up in the treetops? And here's the amazing thing that nobody ever knew until I and a couple others climbed trees in the 1980s. And that is half the species of the world, 50% in the land part of our planet, live in the tops of trees. Everything from, of course, lots of flowers to zillions of ants. Here's a really cool ant that has a rear end that's camouflaged to look like a leaf. Isn't that fun? And of course, most birds live in the treetops, including this frigate bird that lives in the mangroves of Florida and the mangroves of the Galapagos Islands, for example. Lots of frogs and even snakes live in the treetops. Millions of beetles, such as this beautiful Christmas beetle over in Australia, and even bigger animals like the koala live in the tops of trees. So it's this extraordinary library of species, and that's what makes it super, super important to try to take care of it and keep our big trees instead of letting people cut them down. So as I mentioned, millions of insects live in the tops of trees. So you must learn to love insects if you become an arbornaut. Insects are so important to keep us alive. You know, they pollinate most of our foods. They decompose so much trash in the forest as well as in cities. And they also are really cool, like butterflies and moths and all sorts of beautiful things that live in the treetops as well as our gardens, as well as some in our house, of course. There's insects almost everywhere, but they really, really love living in the tops of trees. Other things that live in the treetops are plants. Plants that live on the trees, if you can believe it. And that includes mosses and lichens and many kinds of ferns, and the biggest family of flowering plants in the world, which are the orchids. Lots of orchids live on the branches of trees up in the treetops of the tropical rainforest, which is really, really cool because they're still being discovered as new species. Some things in the treetops are microscopic, so you need to have some kind of extra tools in your laboratory to see them. And this is one of my favorites. Raise your hand if anybody knows what this is. It's probably a hard one, and I don't see any hands raised in the classrooms that I can see, but I bet a few of you probably know what this is. You do need a microscope to see it, but it's cute as can be, and it's called a water bear, which the technical name is tardigrade. And these little water bears float in drops of water. Their face looks kind of like a bear, doesn't it? And they actually live in anything where there's moisture. They live on the surface of leaves. They live in little crevices in the bark. They live in the ice of Antarctica. They live in the hot springs of Yellowstone National Park. They are just everywhere all around the world. They've even been into outer space. So scientists call them extremophiles or extreme organisms because they're so tolerant of very hot and cold temperatures. And I'll tell you a secret, they probably live in broccoli and lettuce and all kinds of garden vegetables that have moisture on them. So guess what? Maybe we've all swallowed a few tardigrades in our consumption of our dinner table menu. So never mind, because there are millions and millions of tardigrades in the world. And I've been studying them over the years just because we're really interested in how they live in the tops of trees. Finally, other things might not live in the treetops, but they visit the treetops. So they really need them to stay alive. And here's a beautiful leopard from India that hunted a deer for its breakfast and then took the carcass of the deer up into the branches of the treetops to eat peacefully and finish breakfast without a lot of other animals trying to steal the carcass of the deer. So treetops are really useful for a lot of animals, even if they don't live up there all the time. So if you want to be an arbornaut, you probably can. You can explore the branches of your trees. You can look out of the window of an apartment and maybe see the top of a tree. You can probably look out of the windows of your school if you have foliage outside of the classroom. You can go to the forest like my two boys. Here's Eddie and James when they were pretty little. On the left, they would help their mom just by finding fallen leaves in the forest. And when they got a little bigger, I made some harnesses for them so that they could go to work and help their moms research. And so they've been really helpful to me over many years of my tree climbing activities. Other students that have climbed with me may not have thought they could become arbornauts, but we made some pulleys and developed some techniques so that even kids that were wheelchair bound could become arbornauts. And here's one of my best students, Rebecca, learning to climb a tree in Kansas. And guess what? Rebecca discovered 3 new species of water bear by learning to climb trees and becoming an arbornaut. So even in the forest that we think we know a lot about, there are still new things to discover. So what happens if we cut down all our trees? This is kind of sad to tell you, but in my lifetime, 50% of the trees of the world have been cut down. So that's really, really bad news. We keep planting new trees, which is great. But in all honesty, sloths and koalas and even water bears really need to live in big trees like this. They can't live on a little baby seedling and have enough habitat to live in. So we need to protect and save our big trees. And if we cut them all down, we are all toast. Human beings will not be able to live on this planet. And that's because trees do so many things to keep us alive. And maybe your teacher can help you after my class and make a little list on your boards or in your computers of all the cool things that trees do for us. You know, first of all, they provide a home for 50% of the species on the planet. Secondly, they clean our water because the canopy filters all of the pollution out of our rainwater and makes it clean. Trees provide oxygen because the leaves are doing this amazing photosynthesis. Trees all over the world provide medicines. The chemicals of tree leaves are so full of amazing things that cure all kinds of diseases. Trees provide timber, which we can harvest very carefully if we make plans and create plantations and cut trees down carefully. Trees provide all sorts of cool things like honey. The bees that live in the trees provide us with beautiful honey for many cultures, including our own. Trees save our soil because the roots hold the soil from being floating away after a rainstorm and flooding in streams. So we really need tree roots to keep our soil intact. Trees store carbon. Those tree trunks are amazing to take that terrible carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere that people pollute and actually store it in the tree trunk, which is such a fabulous, fabulous benefit for all of us humans. And trees provide all kinds of food for us. Maybe you can also make a list of those foods with your teachers. My favorite food, chocolate, comes from a tree. And one of my other favorites, mangoes, also comes from a tree. And of course, trees provide lots of building materials. People make thatch roofs out of tree palms, and they make ropes out of tree vines and all sorts of other things. Finally, you know, trees are very important for a lot of different countries in the world as a spiritual or religious heritage. And I'm going to show you an example of that in a minute in the continent of Africa, where almost everybody feels that trees are very important as a spiritual part of their neighborhood and their community. In fact, let's go there now. This is an aerial view of Ethiopia, a really wonderful country that I work in, which is located in Eastern Africa. But unfortunately for Ethiopia, most of the trees have been cut down for farming and agriculture. As you can see here, the landscape is very brown and the soil is quite dry because Ethiopia doesn't get too much rainfall. And the last remaining trees in Ethiopia are these little circles of green, and those are called church forests. And if we look a bit closer, we'll see the beautiful round church in the middle of this area of forests. And fortunately for Ethiopians, the priests of Ethiopia believe that they need to take care of all of God's creatures. So they try to keep a forest surrounding the church. And those trees tend to be the last trees left in Ethiopia because the farmers don't have too many tools. They don't have tractors and they don't have irrigation. So they have to plow a lot of their fields to try to grow crops. And that means that many of the trees have been cut down. So I've been working in Ethiopia with the priests to try to help them protect these last trees because they're so important. They're the home for all the birds. They're the source of all the medicines. They're a huge spiritual heritage for people in Ethiopia. But what's starting to happen is the farmers, by mistake, are plowing in the wrong places, and the cattle and sheep get into these forests and they eat the trees and they eat the seedlings. And so I've made a project with the priests where we all get together and we have workshops to educate the priests about the importance of trees. So here I am giving a workshop for most of the priests who are men. And of course, you can see I'm the only female at the workshop, but they're really wonderful, wonderful people, and they care so much about their trees. So together we've made a partnership, the priests and I, and we have made a handshake and said that we will protect these trees. And the solution in Ethiopia is very simple. We get the local people to clear the rocks out of their fields, which is really great, and build these beautiful walls that keep the cattle out of the forests and provide the farmers with a boundary so they don't plow too much, and make this beautiful sanctuary of trees surrounding the church. And I've even written a children's book for the kids to understand the importance of trees. You can buy it in English on Amazon.com. And every time we sell a copy in English, we print a copy in Amharic, which is the language in Ethiopia. And I give that away to the kids in the schools over there so they learn about the importance of trees. And here I am in Ethiopia giving kids a copy of this book about trees. And here is one of the first walls that we built in Ethiopia. You can see how beautiful the forest is compared to the landscape outside of the wall. So today, in many, many countries, I'm working really hard as I can, and I hope you'll join me to help every country in the world save their trees. It's really important, and the kids in Ethiopia are always so grateful. I've had lots of schools buy the book, and I've had schools do bake sales, and we take the money over to help move the stones and build the gates and create the walls so that the kids in Ethiopia have their forests intact for them when they grow up, as much as other countries in the world. And everyone, from priests to politicians, need to work together to save trees. So I hope all of you will share the messages that you've learned in this little classroom today, and you'll join me in the challenge to save trees, because we really, really, really need to save trees. We can't lose more than 50%, which I told you earlier, we've already lost. And I have a special program on my website that you can go read about with your teachers called Mission Green, where we want to build 10 of these beautiful canopy walkways in the 10 most endangered forests of the world. And in doing that, we can hire local people to get income through ecotourism instead of from selling logs. And National Geographic's helping me in this effort, and Disney's helping me in this effort, and lots of kids around the world are helping. And we're right now building a canopy walkway in Madagascar because they only have 3% of their trees left. And those beautiful lemurs are only native to Madagascar. And if we lose the trees of Madagascar, we also lose the lemurs, which would be a really horrible thing. So you can read about my project in my book or on my website, and you can also do some activities at home that help with your own local trees, which might include finding big trees in your neighborhood and making sure they're safe, maybe photographing them and having a beautiful tree photo exhibit in your community. Maybe you can visit a canopy walkway if your family wants to go on a vacation somewhere fun, or hopefully you can read books about trees and share the messages about how trees keep us alive. So with that, I'm going to stop my screen share. There's a couple websites for the teachers to learn about all these programs, but we're going to hear from you, and hopefully I can answer some of your questions. Thank you so much for listening.
Wow, thank you, Meg, for an incredible look into your work and for that amazing call to action. Many of us are interested in joining your mission, and now we know exactly what we need to do. Learn about and notice local trees, take pictures of trees and see the difference over time, and try to climb somewhere high, like an apartment balcony or a playground, and look at trees more closely. Thank you again, Meg, and to all the students and the teachers watching. We hope you join many, many more of our events. To all of our young explorers and friends around the globe, this was our last episode for ages 9 through 14 in 2022. So we hope you enjoyed an incredible adventure-filled year of exploring. I can't believe we're at the end of 2022 already. We're so grateful to bring you the stories of our National Geographic explorers and inspire the next generation. And Explorer Classroom isn't done exploring. Oh, no, no, no. We've already got amazing shows lined up for January 2023. So go ahead and register at natgeoed.org/Explorer Classroom. Have a great new year, everyone. And remember, stay curious and keep exploring.